Casey, Kenneth, and I have come together here in Toronto in a little bit of free time we have in August to create a real clear style of play for the near future of what we want to establish with the Canadian national teams.
And we're working through how we can put together a style of play principles document for Canada. I think it's really important that we do have a style of play document. I think it will help in terms of language, all being on the same page, to help coach education, to help the players, to obviously give the Canadian national teams an identity, which I think they've always had, but a commonology across all national teams.
All three of us have similar ideas, but some also nuances that are a little bit different, and I think the key will be for us to come together in a good way to really think about what's the best model for men's, women's, boys, girls, across all ages, an identity and a DNA for what Canada soccer is.
I think it will help the players, it will help the coaches, and something that hopefully will live beyond myself and Jessie.
That was one of the videos released by Canada Soccer this past week, showing recent discussions between Canadian men's national team head coach Jesse Marsch, the women's national team head coach Casey Stoney, as well as sporting director Kenneth Heiner-Muller, discussing and laying down the principles of what Canada's team DNA, at least at the national team levels, should be all about moving forward. This is no easy task for the program. I think those involved in Canadian soccer over the years known that we live in a big country. There's varying opinions about the way that football should be played and how we should go about doing that or achieving that. So let's discuss this project, this endeavor that Marsch, Stoney, and Heiner-Muller are trying to accomplish here. We see different playing models around the world, be it in Spain, in the Netherlands. You can name various countries worldwide with a distinct style of play. In Canada, I mean, I'm not really sure that we have one. We certainly have some strengths in terms of the players that we have and certain playing styles that we advocate for. But how important is it, John, to lay down a blueprint that says across the board, our men's and women's national teams are going to play this type of football?
I mean, I think it's as important as the coaches they educate with this style of play they want to do, the clubs buying into it and the players buying into it and able to filter through and have the youth system produce the players that they want to see. I think all that has to start with that. I mean, at this point, you can write it down and say whatever, but to actually put it into work, it's going to take time. I mean, Spain didn't do theirs overnight. This is going to take years and years, and it has to start from the bottom and work its way up, I think, in my opinion. I think it's great that you can spell it out how you want to do this with the women's national team and the men's national team. But at the end of the day, you got to be producing these players, and the coaches at the bottom have to be your best coaches that know this inside and out and can start the process the right way, young, so that those players are ready at the top level to go out on the field and do what they want to see done.
John's right. When you talk about the DNA, it has to be from grassroots and up. And I think when you get into that, it's a whole bigger conversation we talk about in this country in particular, right? Because when I think about it, when I'm thinking about even the fees that certain players are paying, right? Certain young players are paying to play football in this country, it's absurd. But when you think about the DNA, obviously in other countries too, when they talk about Canadians, always say athletic. Yep. Always say, like, good attitude, right? Like the desire to go and try to learn and make a difference. But you see that at the top level as well. So I'm sure Jesse Marsch and Casey Stoney are probably talking about the nuances of the game and the finishing and all of that. But the DNA, that's kind of something that's the Canadian DNA right there. Relentless, hardworking, but there's stuff we want to add to that. But to John's point, I think it has to be from grassroots.
Yeah, I'm just trying to decipher whether this is achievable or not. We still have so much divide in the way that football is run in this country, from various leagues and various academies with various priorities, sanctioned leagues versus unsanctioned leagues. Like, it's kind of crazy how the web has been cast in this country with no consistency, continuity, or alignment of vision. And that's why I applaud what these three individuals are trying to do to a certain degree, because if they say, we want the national team programs So like from youth national teams all the way up to the senior national teams to play this brand of football, then perhaps more clubs and more players in the process will start aligning themselves with what the national team ambitions are. Does that make sense to you? That might be the only way to have more clubs and more individuals fall in line with one similar, not as precise, but one similar style of play.
Correct, and I think you're right. I think it starts with spelling out what this is. But now the hard work is going to be how you implement this. And I think, you know, it's going to start with coach education. It's going to start with building facilities across the country that are national training facilities that each province or combined provinces can go to, that these coaches that know how to do this the right way are in charge of. And I think that's where you start to be able to do it here in Canada. And I think that's the best way to go about it. But it has to start with how you want to do it and what it's going to look like. And then start from the bottom and feed it up, because I think that's the best way, is to start with the young players. And I'll go back to it again, because I think this is the most important thing about all this. Your best coaches aren't the ones that are coaching the highest national teams or the oldest national teams. Your best coaches have to be the ones at the youngest ages, setting the tone and doing the right things early on for those players to be successful.
Right.
Also think when I look at this, when you look at like Heiner Müller and you look at Casey Stoney and Jesse Marsch meeting up as well, every time we get in a moment to talk to alumni or players that have played this game and have maybe gone to Europe and had a successful career, it's so imperative that they're a part of the game. Because how great would it be to have someone, I'll just throw out a name, like a Atiba Hutchinson or, you know, Christine Sinclair, so players that have played, know what it's like to represent this country and play for Canada in big moments, being there, talking about that DNA, like lending an ear, right? So I think everyone can just kind of look back and be like, okay, Canada's in a decent spot. But people that have actually shed blood for the country and want to see it progress, they need to also be a part of this ride.
In fairness, that was the one thing I took umbrage on about the video, about that meeting, was there was no Canadian in the room. And fair play to Jesse Marsch, because he came out in a subsequent interview released by Canada Soccer, and he said they acknowledge that, and that's kind of the next level. We hired like a 25-year-old technical director for Canadian Soccer. Don't know much about him. He wasn't in the room. You're telling me that there isn't other Canadian coaches or former players that can't be part of that conversation? Like, it's all good and fine that good coaches and smart people, Jesse's smart guy, you know, Casey, smart woman, Kennett, very intelligent, very well-rounded in terms of his experience, all of them coming together. But the people at that grassroots level are Canadians who've
Correct.
lived it, breathed it for years, understand our strengths and weaknesses, and understand better than anyone else the lay of the land in this country. And we just shouldn't overlook the importance of Canadian voices having a say in the way that we play and the way that we stand out in world football, rather than have it dictated, you know, to people from above downwards. I think there's some gaps. I think that this is a really good start, but nowhere near the finish line. So let's take a look at what stands out about the way that Canada played at the World Cup, just in terms of what we saw under Jesse Marsch. Seems like he's going to be one of the leaders, clearly one of the biggest voices in leading this process go forward. Direct speed first, crosses second, passes per defensive action fifth. It's very quick play. It's high-intensity runs. It's aggressive football.
Aggressive. That's the way I would characterize it.
Does this suit, John? Like, you've been around Canadian soccer for so long now. Does this fit the mold that you see for football in this country, where things are and where things should go?
Listen, I like all this. I like being aggressive. I like being on the front foot. I like winning balls back. But I think the focus has to be in the final third. At the end of the day, the final third, finishing, creating the chances, putting the ball in certain areas, guys getting on the end of it. I think that's where we need to see the next step. I think all the pressing and everything else that you're able to win the ball back in advanced areas is super. But once you do that, what's the plan? What's the identity from that moment where you win it back because you're aggressive? How are you going to get to the goal? What are the actions that you want to see? And I think that's, for me, where this needs to go.
we've seen the first iteration of Jesse Marsch in the football, and I think with Casey Stoney and watching the women's game as well, is of course athletic players, switched on, smart, like high IQ. But again, it has to be about the conversion. This has to be the next step, right? And that has to be a part of the DNA is, are you going to be a crossing team? What's your movement like in the box?
Correct.
Can you go and convert? And that's what we're saying with the Canadians, because you take an isolated player going over to Europe or wherever you're playing, Canadians can hang. That's no secret anymore for both the men and the women's side. But it's how you play the game from front to back now. And to your point, John, it's just about the conversion rate.
Yeah. There's a part of me as well that thinks if we have more opportunity that's created through more teams, more investment, more facilities, better coaching, investment in coaching, we're going to end up having a better product. That there is a gap in terms of perhaps those top nations and the technical level that their players play at and the intelligence, the way that they look or view the game to where we are today. We keep on developing, despite our flaws, despite the size of this country, despite our geography, some really, really good players that can play with the best of the best worldwide. I've no doubt about that. But collectively, that's where the gap is. The ability to see the game, read the game, and cerebrally take it to another level, especially with technical ability as well. But that comes through all these other things that no document can kind of lift those ships alone, right? Like that takes actual implementation, that takes actual investment.
Well, until we do it from the grassroots level, you're going to see a lot of these players, both on the men and women's side, be the exception and not the rule. Meaning they got to do it the hard way, or they got to go down the road less traveled.
It's way easier now than ever before. Let's acknowledge that.
Yeah, 100%. Right. But it's still an exception against the rule. You're seeing guys that a player that we just talked about a few segments ago was a Toronto FC player, Malta, Estonia, Belgium, now in the Premier League, right? Like you have to do all these things. But if you have something in place, you're going to see more Promise Davis, more Jonathan Davis, and the women's game as well. It's about building a system that could get the most out of the whole group. And Canada, as much as I agree with you, Wheels have made steps in the right direction, it's still not where it needs to be.
Let's be honest. We have the NSO, we have the CPL. They are starting to produce some players in the youth level that are making the step into the national team programs. It's going to take more time. Okay, that league has to develop. MLS, it was the same way when it started. It took some time for it to turn over where players were being produced regularly and then moving on from there. It's going to take some time because most of the players, as you mentioned, had to go to Europe to make an impact, and they have. But now we need to see it from within and get some more players coming up through the system and the pathways that are created here now.
Right. I mean, there's the long-term view, and I think that those long-term conversations continually need to be had. But I like how both of you also brought up, like, for the now. What needs to happen over the next 4 years for the men's national team?
Yeah.
It might be a little bit too soon to reap the benefits from the women's national team perspective with the Women's World Cup upcoming next year. But certainly, 2031, like these need to be the short-term goals. How to quickly turn around the players that we have now and be able to put them together as a collective to get the most out of them.
Ken Heinz-Muller is in charge and above both the coaches, right? They in some way, right? I would assume.
You think?
Yes. But he needs to be the one that determines how this looks, not only for the next cycle, which both of these coaches are just working through, because that's what their contracts are for, this next cycle, but what's going to look like after the cycle, and feel like that, have the vision to say, okay, this is going to work for the next spell, but 8 years we're still going to be trending in this direction, doing this and this and this to get to where we eventually want to be 10, 12, 16 years from now. I think you have to have that far vision ahead to really see this thing through the way it should be seen through, to be competitive to where you want to be on the international stage.
It's an interesting conversation. Well done to the people at Canada Soccer for pulling back the curtain and allowing Canadian soccer fans and supporters and players and coaches kind of see what's going on and showing what, at the highest level in this country, people are trying to do. We have a long way to go, and I hope that it promotes positive conversations around this and that relevant people do have a say in what football in this country looks like, not just from the top down, but from the ground floor up as well. The TELUS Canadian Championship back underway, first week of September. FC Super de Quebec taking on Forge FC. Vancouver Whitecaps, CF Montreal. The second leg goes 2 weeks later to decide who will play in this year's final.